Alright guys, so back at it here. I've laid out some plot plate here for the chest. Basically just doing some stacking. I had one stack on there and I decided to go up another one. I wanted to make that a little bit more exaggerated, and I want to basically have this like at an angle. So this like whole back of the second half of the plate. Anyway, I'm not going to do that. And then here on the bottom, when this is actually connected onto the chest and then onto here, there's a big gap, or there was a gap between the red part and the center part. So I just wanted to make the red part a little bit deeper back there. So I'll work that out. The front part I mentioned in the last video, just stacking a couple plates on that so that that lines up underneath when this is attached. Ended up being that the back one was farther down than the front one, so just line that up, clean up that. And the front skirts, I did a lot of stacking on here. One stack on each side, two on the top on this little detail, so like this square detail here will be larger. And then down here, so this will actually extend down a little bit farther than it did before. So just kind of extending the front skirts. I don't really think I'm going to do anything with the back skirts. I am going to do something with this back vent, which we'll talk about later. With the back skirts, I think kind of are just fine. I may end up maybe here on the top part like on the front, just adding a couple stacks here to this part here on the top, but that's going to kind of be hidden though with all the backpack stuff going on. Really not too concerned about that. But the first thing that I want to do here is use some of this stuff. So this is just epoxy putty, and this is actually just from like a Daiso, which is basically like a dollar store. So I think this was like 2001, which would be around like $1.80. Very cheap for this. I'm not sure exactly the volume of this, exactly how much is in here, but I'll show you guys what it is here. Basically what I'm going to do is use this to set in my shoulder joints inside here, and also the front and half of this torso piece are held together by, it's a very thin connection there. So just to make sure that this is a little bit more sturdy, and I'm not just gonna like just break this in half later accidentally, I'm just going to take some epoxy putty and push that up in there to just kind of solidify that more, and then I can set in my shoulder joints, which are now, as you can see, just kind of very loose in there, so the epoxy putty will help hold those in place where they should be. So as you can see here, this is actually made up of two parts. So you basically, or I don't know how you would actually do it, but I just kind of slice off a bit, and I really don't need a whole lot in this case, and then just mix it up. And also I do that with my hands, not using gloves. I don't really know if that's good or not, so I can't exactly advise that, but that's what I do. So to set the chemicals in process, you just mix this guy up. And in the case of this one, anyway, you've got a few minutes to work with it, but not a whole lot of time before it starts hardening up. So I am going to try to work relatively quickly here. Just separate that into two halves, one for each side, and I don't want to start smashing too much in there, more than I need. So this will be much harder to get out later if I want to. So if you can see that, I'm feeling a little bit like a dentist now here. I'm just kind of mashed some down inside of there. I can set in my shoulder joint about where I want that to be, like so, and then I'm just going to take a little bit more and just kind of mash it in there around that, and just repeat for the other side too. Okay, there we go. So that I think will take a few hours for that to be really hard. So for now, I'll set that aside. I am going to also, I think, maybe fill in some of this top part later, but not with epoxy putty, with just some polyester putty. So for now, set that aside. Okay, so that is a little bit cleaned up now for the most part. So you can see the shape of the front skirt's now taller, longer, wider, think that is going to fit much better now. The front chest part, the red part there, is more extended, and yeah, it's just kind of starting to take shape. Now, it's all still pretty rough, everything that's on there, and I need to fill in some space there and just fill in all the roughness of where these parts are added so that everything's all nice and smooth. So a couple different types of putty that you can use, but because I want to fill in a little bit larger areas down here, I'm just going to use a little bit of this Tamiya polyester putty. As you can see, this bottle has seen better days, but it's still good. It's a two-part. You have to mix these two parts here together. So you take some from one bottle and then take a little bit of this stuff here, and basically mixing these, you want it to match the color of this yellow of the cap there. It's actually probably not a good idea to use a tray that had previously been used for some panel line wash, because there's apparently still a little bit of black paint there. I thought it was dry, it wouldn't really make any difference. That's from like ages ago, but apparently not. So now it's just a matter of getting it in the area where I want to have it. Alright, so a whole lot of putty laid, and hopefully once that's dry, these parts can be cleaned up to looking pretty good, and then we can start on some of the finer details. So now I just need to give it about 24 hours for that putty to be good and cured. So let's come back after that. Okay, so after some cleaning up on that, and everything's starting to be a little bit more shapely. Front skirts, I think, looking much better. Wider, taller, longer, and they also fit because I had to make this front part there longer down at the bottom as well. The front skirts being longer, I think, matches that quite well, and it actually, I mean, it doesn't look out of place at all. So looking very nice so far, and I just want to say a message here. I'm seeing some comments on this series of people saying that I'm pretty much just building a gym and making a custom gym using parts from the Tristan, or the build is pretty much more gym than it is Tristan at this point, or whatever. But this doesn't look anything like a gym, and when it's done, it's not going to look anything like a gym. Trust me. Yes, I'm using a lot of the gym parts for like the essential parts that will make the kit actually work and look better proportionally, but all of the parts on the outside that will make you think that it looks like the Tristan Gundam will all be there. Once this project is done and someone looks at the final build and says, wow, that's a really cool modified gym, I'm going to be really genuinely surprised, because I really don't think anyone's going to say that. But for now, let's get to work on the arm. So here you have the Tristan's arm, and I'm just going to be not going to be using the hands at all. Those hands are garbage, obviously. And then from here, this single joint in the elbow, that's not going to work either. So we're going to be using the gym's arm. Now, obviously not the shoulder armor part, and we'll take off the top and the top part of this, because this part still here needs to plug on to there through the shoulder armor, right? So I gotta use the top of the Tristan arm and make that work with this. Now there's a couple different ways I can do it, but I think what the easiest way is gonna be is cut this peg down so it's really short, and this part here is pretty wide, so I can cut that, drill up into that so that this peg will plug up into that. So first thing is just to cut this, mark the center, drill that out, take that part off, and we need to cut this off down here. So you just gotta work that down a little bit till it fits, and then we're good to go. So put that back on there, put that back on there, and we're all good. Now the next issue here is with the forearm. Not only do I want to get rid of that seam line, which is very annoying there in the forearm, but I also want to make it so that I can paint the joint separately. So I want to be able to remove this elbow joint and have this part all just fused up together. So if you take that apart, you can see basically that this whole part here basically just slides down, or can just slide down through the arm. So what we can do is we can keep this together with the polycap in there in the wrist and close that up, remove that seam line, and then make it so that this part can just slide in there, just right into the polycap, and then it'll be all good. But there's some stuff blocking us in the way, the pegs that were holding that part in place, but since we don't need to hold it in place anymore, we can just cut those out. So when that's all gone, let's test it out. Put the polycap back in. Now we've got a nice clean path for this to go right in there to the polycap. And there we go, it actually pushes the polycap out the front a little bit, but we'll make sure that that's glued in there nice and tight later. But the main part is that it's all good. So now we can, first we need to fix the polycap so that this will actually close up tightly. So that's in the way. I'm basically gonna just make it a little bit thinner by just taking just a little cheese slice off each side of this. Pop it back in, test it out, and that's still not really wanting to stay closed all the way, so that's making me think that maybe it's not the polycap at all. Closing it up without the polycap, it closes up just fine, so that means it is the polycap, but it's not the part that I thought. Slicing down the polycap and a little bit more, and I think it's gonna be okay. Now just a little drop of super glue in here to hold that polycap in place later. Well, I'm giving the super glue a few minutes to dry. Let's go down to the forearm of the Tristan. So like I said, I want to keep the aspects that make this as Tristan-y as it is. So I'm gonna keep this part on the back of the arm, even though I don't really particularly care for its shape, but we are going to change it up a little bit. So set that to the side for now. And then the parts for the forearm, to pull this apart, I basically just want to use this like triangle part there at like the back of the forearm. So as usual, it's just a matter of cutting that part away, and this whole part we don't need. Toss that. So after we've got those parts freed, we're basically going to take the back of the part, which looks like this, and turn it into this, where it's just more flat and sanded down. Because then we're going to take the forearm part, sand that circular part down, and then basically just place this over that like so, so it'll be in relatively the same position that it was before, just here on the new arm. Alright, so the next thing is getting this blue part here on the back of the arm. Now, I want to have it like about there, but it doesn't quite fit. So what I want to do is just actually make it wider. So what I'm going to do is just saw it right down the middle, and then add some plot plate and just expand it out wider. There we go. Now our piece is now in 2 halves. I want to just cut out a bunch of this stuff here on the inside. We don't need any of that. Check how long a piece we're gonna need here. Double up, and
I'm not finding anything for double up.
So once that is glued, it's once again just time to play the waiting game until that's dry, and then just cut out the plot plate around the edges, and we'll have it done. Luckily I already did one before, so here's what it's going to look like when that's all together and the plot plate, extra plot plate, is cut away. I've also cut out the front edge of this. So this is the arm that I had previously been working on, and cutting out that little bit at the front there will make it so that when this goes on the back of the arm, that will kind of fit over this kind of cuff part here at the front, and then that will sit on the back of the arm like that, and that little triangle piece will fit on there like that. So I'm gonna cut a little bit more of this, just kind of reshape this blue part here a little bit more, and then I'm not sure if I'm going to want to have that like permanently attached, or just use a peg or a magnet or something so that I can take that off for painting. I don't know what is really going to be easiest. It won't be really the most difficult thing to mask if I just end up wanting to mask it, but as far as the major modifications to the arm, that's done. So I'll work on just kind of refining this up and getting this looking a little bit more ready. And then I'll come back and show you guys that in the next episode. So that's going to be it for this episode, guys. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.